Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream, live on Al Jazeera and on YouTube. China's thriving economy has attracted people from all over the world, not least Africans seeking better opportunities. But many black residents and visitors have found that endemic racism has soured their experience. Today in the stream, what it's like being black in China. Most people are familiar with China's lucrative economic projects in Africa, from building roads and railways in Tanzania to running copper mines in Zambia. But for many years, economic opportunity has been a two-way street. Take the Chinese port city of Guangzhou. Thousands of African business people have made it their home over the last 2 decades. One particular quarter of the city has the nickname Little Africa and is filled with export companies. But recently, authorities have intensified an immigration crackdown in Guangzhou, leading many African migrants to reconsider their future. Visa rules are zealously policed, and renewing residency permits is fraught with complexities. Many Africans in Guangzhou say the restrictions unfairly target them and that they are an extension of the overt racism they've experienced during their time in China. Black residents and visitors in other major cities such as Beijing and Shanghai have also reported negative experiences, ranging from stares and demands for photographs to unwanted touching. In a recent conversation that drew hundreds of retweets and likes on Twitter, Benedicte Kinkolo related her experiences of, quote, exhausting racism in China, saying that she considered leaving Beijing countless times. So how can China be more racially inclusive? And for more on this, we're joined from Shanghai by Naisha Davis, a writer and content creator. She recently wrote an article for Sixth Tone that asked whether films such as Black Panther can change Chinese attitudes towards race. In Hong Kong, we have Roberto Castillo, an assistant professor on the Cultural Studies program at Lingnan University. For the last 6 years, he's researched the experiences of Africans in China, particularly those living and working in Guangzhou. Chen Zhang is a political scientist focusing on migration and citizenship. She joins us from the Danish capital, Copenhagen. And from the Chinese capital, Beijing, we have Hannah Ryder. She is CEO of Development Reimagined. That's a consulting firm on links between China and Africa. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Now let's get started on Twitter with the thread that I mentioned earlier that sparked today's discussion from Benedicte, a graduate student in Beijing. She writes, "Let me put it this way. China is not for the faint-hearted." And she went on to explain what she meant in a video comment that she sent to the stream. Have a look.
Being Black in China has been full of ups and downs. And the downs were characterized by a lot of frustrating experiences, such as people touching my hair without my permission or asking me if my skin color was real. Or when I would tell them that I'm French, they would then question me and say, how can you be French? French people are only meant to be white and you're Black. So it leads to a lot of frustration, not so much resentment, but more like sadness, because you kind of wish that people in this day and age didn't ask such questions. And you can try and explain and educate, but you can't do this every single time.
Naisha, now you've been living in China for about 3.5 years. Can you relate to Benedicte's experience?
Absolutely. So many times, I've had experiences like that where, my nationality is being called into question and, there's microaggressions and, just a lot of different things that come up that are race related, like on a daily basis, and it kind of becomes frustrating because you're just trying to live your everyday life. I understand that I am different and this is a different experience for both of us, but everything can't be a teachable moment.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example? Is there something in mind that comes to mind? I know you told our producers about one experience that kind of stuck with me, and it's when you were in a cosmetic store. It's an international chain based here in the U.S., but it's also in China. This was in Hong Kong, I believe. And someone made a comment about your skin color.
Yes, I don't know if I should say the chain, but I was in a cosmetic store, and the guy was, I guess, trying to make a joke, and he basically said that my skin was brown and it was a brown or dark because the air quality in Chinese mainland is dirty or is so poor. So my skin was brown and dirty.
What did you say back to that?
I didn't even really know what to say, to be honest. I mean, I think he realized at the time that was like not the move. I think he realized it. So we kind of looked at each other, and I just kind of like left after that. I was just like, well, I'm not going to spend any money here today. And it was very frustrating, but it was also very eye-opening because, sometimes it feels as if Hong Kong kind of positions themselves, when I've spoken to people from Hong Kong, as being so much more enlightened than Chinese mainlanders. But it was like, no, it's still some of the same type of colorism issues that you would deal with here or anywhere else.
I want to share another example we got from a member of our community. This is Alex Downs, and he's in Barbados, but spent some time working in China. And this is what he told us about his experience.
For me as a black person, it was a real culture shock. Having what I'd say is your personal space, your privacy invaded at most opportunities in public, whether it is people taking pictures of you without asking, or people asking to take pictures of you, people asking you to hold their child, people staring at you, children pointing at you. Psychologically, it's really difficult to adapt to that when you've come from a society where even if you are a minority, it's accepted, it's known, that diversity is present.
Hannah, what goes through your mind when you hear experiences like Alex's?
Well, to be honest with you, I am, having lived in the diaspora for a long time as well, I am not sure that this is necessarily an issue which is, certainly race issues are not confined to China. And also, I have a lot of friends who are from all around the world. I came here first to work for the UN, and also I have a child, and so I kind of am around a lot of people who are from all over the world, and they also have issues where they worry and are unhappy about Chinese people taking pictures of them and so on. So I'm not saying that there is no racism issue, but I also think that there are, whether it's unfamiliarity, there are people in China who have never seen a black person before. They also have never seen a blonde woman or blonde man before, red-haired, etc. So there's a lot of, there are some people who are just having tourism experiences for the first time, and if you're around those sorts of areas, then this is what you'll experience. But I think there are more challenging issues in regard to racism, whether it's China or the UK that you're in, or even the US. Of course, there's daily issues, but what's also important is also the questions around government policy, the questions around how do people do business, how do people, and Africans definitely have a more challenging time around the world as well with this. So I think what people are experiencing is definitely something that they feel personally. Whether it's confined to them, that's another question.
Chen and Roberto, I could see you nodding there as Hannah was speaking. Chen, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I was thinking, I definitely agree with Hannah that it's a problem not confined to the black community in China. It could apply to many other foreigners, simply because of the country's inexperience with cultural diversity and racial diversity and so on. So there is ignorance, there is lack of experience with intercultural interaction, and there is cultural differences, so to speak. But on the other hand, I also think recognizing these issues should not prevent us from seeing there is also racism and racial thinking, which has a long history in the whole 20th century. And it's not only in people's mind, it's also in media representations, it's also in realities and in the real social interactions and so on.
So you mentioned media representations. I pulled up a few headlines here to illustrate that point. So this is from Quartz Africa. Headline, a Chinese exhibit comparing Africans to animals shows the problematic racial attitudes in China. And you can see one of the pictures from that exhibit here. This was later taken down after people complained. The exhibit was removed. This is from several years ago, but it's one that comes to mind when people are discussing this topic. A laundry detergent ad in which someone of African descent was placed in the washing machine and comes out fair skinned. And here's another. This is a CCTV Spring Festival Gala, including, as this headline calls it, a truly shameless Africa skit featuring blackface. Now, Chen, I know you actually wrote about that incident. What did that say to you?
Well, when the show was out, everyone's talking about it, and I thought at the time the focus was really about blackface itself and whether it in itself indicates racism in the Chinese context. And lots of defenders were saying that imposing a cultural symbol that has its roots in Western colonialism onto China is Eurocentric. And I thought, okay, let's contextualize it, let's historicize it. So instead of the symbol itself, I thought what we should really, and also be talking about is the history of racial thinking in modern China and lived experiences of racial discrimination in contemporary society. So I think that's exactly why having the kind of conversation we're having right now is really important.
I have this tweet here from a member of our community, Hagma, who says, I get the discomfort, but you are in their land. I'm assuming you went there willingly. Why would and should they be expected to adapt or change their behaviors and customs to suit your comfort levels? That's a little bit of a pushback there. Roberto, this person mentions people going to China willingly. And some of those people are going to one particular community in specific, one city. This is Guangzhou. What do you make of this person's comment, and why are people coming?
There's a lot of people from different parts of the world coming to Guangzhou. In particular, this big city in southern China attracts people because of the trading practices, because of the commerce, right? Now, we need to understand that when we're talking about the interactions that a lot of Black people and a lot of African people have in the Chinese city of Guangzhou, they have interactions with a very diverse Chinese population, right? So a little bit like what Hannah was saying earlier, there's a lot of people coming from the provinces, a lot of people that have never seen foreigners that are the ones interacting with these Africans and with these Black people in Guangzhou. Now, I think that there's something that is very important to highlight. I agree with Hannah and with Chen in the sense that, all these experiences of people touching or people sort of essentializing the foreignness of different people are very important, and we need to consider those. But I think that there are way more difficult experiences that many foreigners, and particular Black people and Africans in Guangzhou experience, right? I'm talking about certain institutional constraints, certain problems that they have with kind of police persecution in the streets, a lot of precarity because you get a lot of youngsters that come to Guangzhou and they overstay their visas. So, I totally agree with Hannah in the sense that you cannot compare the Chinese context and the experience of race in the Chinese context with what happens in Europe and what happens in North America. But still, a lot of people in the Chinese context feel that it's a bit of a difficult experience, way beyond the, touching the skin, touching the hair. There are problems that are bigger than that and that people experience on a daily basis, in particular in cities like Guangzhou.
Here's a tweet we got from Mubarak who says, just today I arrived in the city of Guangzhou. As a Nigerian, it was hell before I could secure a modest hotel room. About 10 different hotels refused me accommodation, citing that the security scanner can't scan my country's passport and my visa. It's an intentional strategy to frustrate us. Earlier,
I would say that happens to a lot of foreigners. That is not something that only happens to Africans in China or Africans in Guangzhou. I think that there's a lot of media narratives nowadays about Africans in China that sort of focus on certain things that happen to Africans And people say, oh, there's like an anti-African campaign in China. The Chinese government makes it very difficult for African countries to get or renew visas. But this happens also to a lot of people from many other countries, right? I'm not saying it is not a difficult experience from the African side, but sometimes in media you see all these narratives talking about the problems that Africans face in China, and they don't pay attention to very similar problematics that many other foreigners, especially from like Latin America and East Europe, also face, and the Middle East also face in China, right? So sometimes it's not only Africans or Black people going through these issues.
And an interesting twist.
I really agree with that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Also because, I mean, part of the challenge, and I was recently interviewed as well about some of these issues in Guangzhou. I don't live in Guangzhou, so I can't speak for people in Guangzhou. But what I do know is that in terms of the setup, in terms of the institutional support for African people here in China, there's not enough. So, you know, Britain, you know, business people who are going to Guangzhou, Britain has got a chamber of commerce, a very big chamber of commerce, who have a consul, you know, several branches across China. America the same, Australia the same. There's nothing like that. There's an African Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, and they're fairly small at the moment. So we need a lot more support, and of course there is an opportunity for China, the Chinese government, to support these sorts of ventures and so on, support business people, in particular coming into China. It's a very important part of the relationship, but that is really partly because there is an absolute deficit here, and again, that's because we Africans are the continent with the most majority poor people in the whole world. So we also have to be aware that these are challenges that we also have to take responsibility for and really try and address ourselves as well.
So I want to throw a potential twist into this conversation. This is from Aubert, and this is picking up on a point that you were making, Roberto, about remembering that this is not just happening to Africans, this is happening to a lot of people. Aubert makes he has a perspective that Westerners are in a different category altogether, whether they're Black or other ethnicities. Aubert says, I went there as a researcher from a European university. When my host university realized I'm Black, they treated me like a subhuman. If you want to go to China as a Black person, make sure you have a US or British passport. He goes on to say it's a perception that anything or anyone from the US and Europe is best, and that all from Africa and Black is bad. The advantage for African Americans is that they have the US passport to cure their Blackness. Naisha, I'm hoping you can weigh in here on this one. Do you think that having that US passport gives you a slight edge up?
Absolutely, and that happens all over. That happened to me when I was living in South Korea. That happened to me when I was living in Holland. You know, I got treated differently than a person from Suriname did. And any type of cool factor that I have or any type of privilege I have here specifically is tied directly to the fact that I have an American passport. It's not tied to my Blackness at all. No, that is 100% correct.
We got this comment from.
I just jump in?
Roberto, go ahead.
Jump in very quickly on the comment on the tweet by Aubert. I know Aubert, and in many ways I agree with him. But I also want to say that you know, specifically in the case of China, I mean, I also have a passport from a third world country or a poor country or whatever. But in the case of China, it is very interesting to see that when you are a non-white researcher, then you find a lot of problems trying to do research. I myself have done research for the last 6 or 7 years in China, and a lot of people don't think that you're a researcher, or don't see you as a professor, or don't see you as like, you know, like an authoritative figure worth of talking to, just because you are not a white old professor, white beard, white hair, you know what I mean? So I think that's a global problem. This is not only pertaining to China, but you know, this tweet by Aubert, I think it links to this conversation about race and research in the context of China.
I wanted to bring this comment up, but I want to bring this in, and then I'll throw it over to you, Chen Chen, because we got this on YouTube Live. This person says, I don't know what to think. I appreciate that societies around the world should be more inclusive of all groups of people, but can you really blame a society as relatively homogenous as China's? Now, Han Chinese account for an overwhelming majority of the ethnic population of China, so this does seem to make sense. Chen Chen?
I don't know. A relatively homogeneous society, yes, but it doesn't mean that this society should be sticking to the old kind of hierarchical worldview. I think what we learn from lots of the incidents we've been hearing about is that this 19th century racial theories divide the world into biologically distinctive groups, and they are hierarchically organized with white people on the top, and some are more superior than others. And I think this is very much deeply rooted still in the mind of modern China. So to add on to the racist stories we've been learning about, I think this logic also can go against the Chinese themselves as an ethnicity. For example, Chinese Americans, for example, might find it harder to get a job as English teacher in China than white non-native speakers, simply because parents might prefer white people to teach their children over Chinese local native speakers. So I don't think that kind of hierarchical worldview should sustain in a relatively homogeneous society. And on the other hand, China is describing itself or projecting itself as a kind of rising power in the world. And this kind of strives to be a different kind of power, different than the colonial powers in the past and so on. And it claims to be more open to the world. So I think this is definitely going to need to be changed.
I think that it's important when we talk about racism. Just a very brief comment. When we talk about racism, I think that in the context of Africa and China and in general globally, we need to talk about racisms with an S, with a plural, right? Because when we talk about racism in the context of China, we're talking about very different historical and economic factors affecting all this racial imagination about otherness, right? So, and I don't want to sound too academic, but I think that we need to start talking about racisms, and not only about racism, because every time we throw that word of racism, we're kind of resorting back to the Euro-Atlantic, North American context, and we need to contextualize things in the Asian and in the Chinese context.
Yeah, and to add on to that,
Hannah hasn't talked for a second. Go ahead, Hannah.
Even in China, that otherness extends to the smaller ethnic minorities. So this is something which is really important for China to address. The aspects about otherness, xenophobia, racism, whatever you want to call it, it does exist. And what is important is part of that is fueled a lot by nationalism. So we go back to that skit at Spring Gala. There were a lot of Chinese people who really, actually, it personally was not so offensive, but there were people who were very, very negative about the response. Some Chinese people who were very extremely defensive about it. And this was what really got me actually angry. It wasn't the skit itself. It was the lack of humility, in a sense, about, look, actually there are some people who are offended here, and we will take their view into account. So there's a lot of complexity here in China. It's not just about touching. It's not just about whether your skin is black or white. Many foreigners have challenges, but hopefully this is something that with more interaction, more diversity in China, which again, there's a lot of China, should be admitting more and more Africans, more and more foreigners overall. No global superpower, no diverse country, no country can work well without that kind of diversity. And moving into an innovation-based society, it absolutely needs us, right?
I think that we're light years from China becoming a migrant destination country, right? I don't see this as a priority in terms of policy making in China.
But visa policies are being improved for many European and for the American. There's recently Sanya 72 hours or whatever visa free, etc. The same in Beijing if you have a British or American passport or European passport. Unfortunately, no Africans on the list.
So guests, unfortunately, the conversation is heating up, and that's all the time we have for now. I want to thank you for being part of this conversation. And for those online, keep your comments coming via Twitter, YouTube, and aljazeera.com/thestream. Thanks for joining us today. Bye for now.